in America, the Western-born ones, without exception, actually, they all had a psychedelic experience prior to their going into Buddhism as a vocation, as to be teachers. And except for one, but later on, Brother David Steindl-Rast told me she was fibbing, that she also had the experience. So I think I can say without exception. You know, I think it's interesting. Terence McKenna had some interesting things to say about that. There's an interview with him in the book also, because a lot of people don't realize that his initiation into mysticism and to these alternative ideas that he developed and articulated to a great extent later came from his early studies from Zen and Suzuki Roshi, and he was also an art student. And he says that you know, that there's really two kinds of Buddhism. There's Buddhism that you read about and you close your eyes and think about, but then you're still an armchair Buddhist. You know, that when you take psychedelics, that's when you become a full-fledged Buddhist. Now, that's a very unusual position to take and not shared by too many. But he makes a strong, sort of interesting case for that. I think, I think that not only in Buddhism, but in all areas of our culture, we are going to see this conversation start to take root and become more important. And that it's really the transformative power of psychedelics, both on the individual and also the entire culture, that we saw the beginnings of in the 60s. I personally think the 60s were a dress rehearsal for what's about to come. I think we are moving.
We've been through that for a while now,
but you know, it pays to hold on to your convictions, and so I think we're going to see the blossoming of a major era of psychedelics as we move further into the Anthropocene and face the challenges that we are going to inevitably face. So, I mean, Buddhism is no exception.
Yeah, I'll just say there's one really inspiring thing that happened recently about the integration of psychedelics into culture and with religion. And so there was just the annual conference of the American Psychiatric Association. And it took place last month in Toronto. And about 12,000 psychiatrists came from all over the world. And the head of the American Psychiatric Association, they're president for 1 year, and they get elected right after the annual conference, and then they plan the next conference. And then you go. So this fellow, Paul Summergrad, who was the president for this recent conference, permitted us to have a presentation, a 3-hour panel on psychedelic psychotherapy during the official conference. And in the exhibit hall, MAPS bought a table for $5,000, and we exhibited our information near Big Pharma and all their other stuff, where they were spending hundreds of thousands for these massive exhibits and stuff. So we felt like we were really pretty much making it into this mainstream psychiatry. But what we didn't count on is that there's so many people there that there's like 10 or 15 things going on at any one time. And the president, Paul Summergrad, decided that at one of these he was going to show an interview, an hour-and-a-half interview that he was going to show and talk about with Ram Dass, that he did with Ram Dass. Now, during this interview, he spoke to Ram Dass and said that when he was 19 years old, he took LSD, and it motivated him. He had a very profound mystical experience, but he didn't know how to integrate it. He dropped out. He studied Zen for several years. He so much went as to be like a beggar, like wandering around, you know, just asking for support. And then he had a dream, and the dream was that he should become a psychiatrist. So he's 65 years old. He's reached the pinnacle of his profession, and he's using that opportunity to say that at an early age he was inspired by psychedelics, both to Zen and to psychiatry. So I think the aging of the baby boomers and the fact that there's millions of people that had these experiences when they were young, gave it up often for work or for family or for cultural reasons, and now near the end of their life, thinking more spiritually, are coming back around and saying, we got to find a way to come to grips and integrate this into our culture. So I think both in religion and psychiatry, in all different ways, it really feels like it's happening.